Napoleon's War to the Gates of Moscow by Worthington Games. This is the sequel to Napoleon's War The 100 Days, a game that I played last spring and that I enjoyed very much, so I was pretty excited about this game. The game comes with 4 new battles to play, but in terms of rules, there aren't really significant differences from the previous game. There are tweaks here and there, but they are pretty minor. The main difference is actually an optional rule. Now the game comes with a set of action chits that the players can place in an opaque container, and then they can play the game as a chit pool game. So they will just draw chits from the cup, and that will tell them who is an ex-player that can spend an action point. But in order to execute shock attacks that require 2 action points, you still have to bank actions from one turn to the other, or better, from one draw to the other. You have to wait until you've drawn enough chits to be able to execute that action. So I realized that when I was playing the game in this way, I was still just banking actions, and before I actually acted, I had banked so many. I had banked a good number, such that it was almost like when I'm playing the game in the regular way, when I have all of my action points at the beginning. The frustrating thing is that now I had to wait. I guess that this is not always true. It does open options. If you are executing small actions, if you're moving or firing, then you may want to be able to do that before you would do it in the regular game, so you sneak your actions between the opponent's actions. But to me, that, I don't know, it just didn't seem that exciting an option to me, especially probably just because I enjoyed the original game so much. I was so used to that way of playing the game, so I just reverted to the original way of playing the game, and this is how I played the 4 scenarios in this game. So this new installment in the series is mainly about the battles, much more than about the new rules. So let's take a closer look at the battles and see how they play. Map and setup for the Battle of Aspern-Essling. As you can see, the area where the actual fight will take place is mainly clear terrain. There are 3 victory point areas for the French player, represented by 3 towns there in the background. Victory point areas for the Austrian player are this hex here, and this other hex here, which is worth 2 victory points. So maybe the Austrian player will choose to send a cavalry unit to take control of that hex rapidly. But most likely, control of victory point areas is not going to be the main factor in this battle, because as you can see from the initial deployment, you have the French player surrounded by a line of Austrian units, and this is a pretty static situation because there is only clear terrain between the 2 armies. Probably infantry units will not want to take the lead in the action, and the players will tend to exchange cavalry charges and gunshots at one another. Those, under the circumstances, are definitely the most effective ways to hurt your opponent, and unfortunately, because of this, the battle may tend to become a little repetitive and a little static. In the second part of the battle, if the guns take down most of the cavalry units, then the surviving and reduced cavalry units and the infantry units will have to figure out different ways to deal with things. But until then, again, the battle is not the most exciting that there is in the game. It is, again, a little static and a little repetitive. Definitely not my favorite scenario in the Napoleon's War system. Battle of Austerlitz, with the Allied units on top of or behind the Pratzenhates, with the French units around this stream here. There are also 4 French units and a French leader that can enter the game as reinforcements in turn 5 from these hexes here. There are 3 victory areas on the board. This hex here, this hex here, and this hex here with the French units. The Allied player wins the game if he has control of 2 of those areas at the same time before turn 30th. If that doesn't happen, if the French player prevents him from winning the game in that way, then victory is determined by counting victory points that are gained by eliminating enemy units. And this is a very engaging and fun scenario, especially when you compare it with the one that I showed you earlier. The LA player can try to concentrate his efforts in one point of the thin French line or in several points. He can try to push in different points and see which ones give first. The French reinforcements will of course add to the action because they can be sent to different areas of the board. Probably the infantry units will mainly work around this area, around this victory point area here, but they may also choose to cross and become more aggressive. Also, this cavalry unit here will actually be able to ride around and reinforce different areas of the rear guard here. Just many different ways in which the players can deal with the situation. The heights here, this elevation here, the stream, and these little towns, these are all landscape factors that will be relevant in the development of the game, and the players will have to work around those and try to exploit them to their advantage. Very dynamic scenario, a lot of different action that can go on at the same time, action that moves around the board. Extremely engaging scenario with a lot of movement, a lot of action, and it's very refreshing to play this one, especially after you play the previous one. The Battle of Marengo. The French player starts with his units on this side of the stream. The Austrian player sets up on the other side. The French setup is predetermined. The Austrian player can choose how to deploy his units within this area. So from game to game, there are different options to explore. At the beginning of this scenario, the Austrian player is in advantage and also has the role of the attacker. The Austrian infantry units are represented by 3 figurines here as opposed to 2 in other scenarios. Also, the Austrian player has 4 guns here as opposed to only 2 such units belonging to the French player. The Austrian player has 4 action points per turn, whereas the French player only has 3. And what the Austrian player is trying to do is to inflict a lot of damage on the French units, of course, but also to take control of this hex here and this hex here. This hex is worth 3 victory points to the Austrian player, and this one 2 victory points. If you consider that victory goes to the player that reaches 7 victory points first, you understand that taking control of those hexes really can almost grant victory by itself. So the Austrian player is definitely going to push and try to make his way towards that area. The French player has the advantage of defending behind the stream, has the advantage of having some units in the town of Marengo, but with all of these guns here ready to fire, well, it is not going to be too healthy for the French player to linger around this area for too long. So probably the French player will have to retreat and try to delay the Austrian player as much as possible, at least until turn 10. In turn 10, things will change. The French player starts receiving 5 action points each turn, and the Austrian player keeps receiving 4. And also the French player will receive these reinforcements here that will enter the board from this area here. So actually it is possible, if the French player manages to time things well, that the Austrian player will be delayed to the point that he will be very close to these 2 towns here around turn 10. He'll be ready to launch the final attack, and then the reinforcements will pop out from the rear guard, and the French player at that point will have a chance to start pushing back. So the last section of the battle may take place around here, and it may be a little chaotic with armies that at that point are almost exhausted, are reduced, and are just trying to deal the final blow to one another just to gain the last victory points necessary to win the game. So overall, very nice scenario. A lot of dynamic action, the role of the attacker and the defender that tends to switch at some point in the game. Both players are running against the clock. The Austrian player is trying to win the game before turn 10, and of course the French player is trying to survive long enough to get a chance to reverse the course of the action. So, interesting situation for both players, a lot of possible ways in which this scenario can be resolved. Really enjoyable scenario. Borodino, the players may use the historical setup, which you see here, or the players can choose free setup with the French player deploying anywhere on this side of this line and the Russian player on the other side of that line. These areas here represent the redoubts, and these are extremely important areas. The French player gains a victory point for each such X that he controls at the end of a turn. So there can be a huge amount of victory points for the French player if he manages to take those X's, of course, because there are a lot of Russian guns here, and also there are elite units here, so particularly hard to take down. Different player also has strong units, but it is gonna be quite a gruesome confrontation. Clearly there is the potential here for a lot of fire, just going back and forth and back and forth. There's a potential for a pretty static action in the middle of the map. But there is a saving grace here, which is the possibility for the French player to try to outflank the readouts from one or two sides. These units start pretty close to a point from which they can attack the readouts from behind, and the French player can also explore the option of using these cavalry units, taking advantage of this road again to try to take the redoubt from behind or from the flank. Of course, there will be Russian units that will try to prevent that from happening. But still, these attempts will create interesting actions around here with infantry and cavalry units harassing each other, trying to outmaneuver each other and to get in each other's way, while at the same time these guys are just firing back and forth, and maybe the French player is also trying to prepare a big push to go against the redoubts. So actually, overall, I found that the battle works in different ways in different parts of the map, from the static section to more mobile section, and that creates sort of overall a nice balance, and it makes the battle pretty fun to play. This is a nice new addition to the Napoleon's War series. I enjoyed the first game and I definitely enjoyed this one. I did not mind the fact that there aren't major changes in the rules, just because I enjoyed the original rules very much, so I didn't feel the need for any change. The one relevant change, the chat pull mechanic, I don't use it, but it is there if you want to try the game that way, if it helps you make the game feel fresh or give you different challenges, then you can do it. That is good. I'm fine with the game as is. The game offers 4 new battles, most of which are very good. I enjoyed Austerlitz a lot. That is my favorite one. Next, I would say Marengo. I really enjoyed the strong narrative feel. Borodino, I was a little afraid about it at the beginning, but then it turned out to be interesting because there are different types of actions that are required on the board at the same time in different areas of the board, and there are of course challenges that come from that. The weak point of the package is really Aspro Nestling, because that scenario offers so little. It is such a static scenario. I can't find a way to enjoy it. Maybe it could work as an introductory scenario, but this is not a complicated system that it requires an introductory scenario. You can just start from any scenario and you can just have fun, and definitely it is not a hard game to approach. So that is the one negative thing about this package. Overall, this is a very nice game, but it is not going to change your opinion about the Napoleon's War system. If you enjoyed the first game, you're going to enjoy this one, and I recommend you get this game. If you did not like the first game, then this is definitely not a purchase for you.